الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We're continuing with our sessions at lunchtime, and I just want to remind you that this year one of the suggestions I had given at the beginning was to say that our focus this year and in previous years has been on living Islam and bringing Islam into the classroom and how do you live as a Muslim. And I say that it's not just important to talk about what practices are important for us, but also to try out these practices in our classes as well. If you remember, I made the suggestion that it would be good to start the day or to start the class with a short dua, like the dua for the 12th Imam. It would be good to encourage them to give sadaqah as well, bring a quarter or a dollar that goes towards a good cause. And I just want to remind you that the grade 10 class is going to be having a bake sale next week, and proceeds for the bake sale will be going to fund the project in Kibaha. So I hope inshallah that all of you will be supporting them as well. And then thirdly, also to have reflective moments in class, a moment of reflection depending on their age category. Now, living Islam is something that is sometimes a little bit difficult to bring in the class, especially in certain topics. Because when you talk about living Islam and you talk about fiqh, well, it is about practicing the faith. When we talk about akhlaq, these are the values of the faith, the moral standards by which we want to live. When you talk about aqaid as well, how does your aqaid impact the way you think about the world? So there it is very easy to do that. But it can sometimes be difficult to talk about living Islam when you are discussing history, because history is in the past. And history can both be challenging to teach, and it can also be fun to teach as well. Challenging to teach because there are a lot of names, and these names are in Arabic. And if they don't speak any of the traditional languages, then these names become very, very hard for them to pronounce as well. This person ibn that person, and that person ibn that person. And that's all they know, yes? But it can also be fun to teach because it is history. And who doesn't like to hear stories? Even the grade 10 class loves to hear stories as well. So what I want to do over the next few weeks is talk about some ways that we can teach history that brings history to life. And one of the things that I want to share with you today, that whenever you are teaching history, and even if a historical story comes up in aqaid, or it comes up when you're teaching Quran, an important thing to do is take them back to the moment. Okay? Let's try to remember that. Take them back to the moment. All right? When you look at the stories in the Quran drops all sorts of names. It just puts them on the side. The names of places and towns and peoples and times and dates, they all go to the side. But when you look at the stories of the Quran, the one thing that the Quran does is whenever it gives you a story, it takes you back to the moment. All right? And that's important. Why? Because it tells you what were the aspirations of those people, what were their challenges, what were their dilemmas. Don't think by any means it was an easy decision for them to make. Oh, in the Battle of Uhud, I would have done that. With Imam Hussein, I would have done that. In the Battle of Siffin, I would have done that. Yes, because you were not in the moment. It was very different in the moment. What were their anxieties? What were their hopes? What were their aspirations? What were their experiences? What were their attitudes? Right? People of Kufa were people who, the reason Imam Ali moved his capital from Medina to Kufa is because in the Battle of Jamal, nobody, even the people of Medina were not supporting him. But the people of Kufa rose up to support him. Right? But then what happened? When it came later on, at the time of Imam Hassan, was it as simple as they said, well, we don't want to support you anymore. We are going to become immoral people? Or were they tired and exhausted because they had fought so many battles? I'm not saying what they did was right, but I'm saying when you go back in the moment, you realize the challenges that people face. Now, when you look at the Quran takes you back in the moment. And yesterday in the tafsir at night, we were doing the tafsir of the story of Prophet Musa in Surah A'raf. It was very interesting for us as we were looking through it, because it's talking about the great showdown, the contest that happened between Prophet Musa and the magicians. One thing about the Quran is whenever you're reading the Quran, you will see that the Quran has certain expressions in there that just don't fit over there, that will nag you. Why is God talking about this over here? It seems out of place. And normally when something is nagging us, Rather than thinking about it, we say, inshallah, there's a hikmah in it. Let me move on in my reading. I have to reach the end of the juz'. I have to reach the end of the surah. Yes? But those things that nag you, when you start thinking about them, I have found in my experience, that's where the greatness of the Quran comes to life. Like that's where your mind is going to open up. That's where you're going to start understanding things which normally you wouldn't have understood. And last night when we were looking at the story, you find that God builds up the moment. You cannot understand that aspect of it until you go back in history. And God says, imagine yourself in the court of Fir'aun. What do you think would have been happening at that moment? When you start imagining yourself, then those points start to fit into place. Okay. So the story is a very simple story. Look, Prophet Musa and the magicians, they met in court. Prophet Musa, they threw down their sticks. Prophet Musa threw down his stick, his snake ate up their snake. That's the story. Done, right? But Allah builds it up. And look at the way He builds it up. He says that when the magicians were called upon by Fir'aun, they first came to Fir'aun and said, Alana ajr. Is there a reward or an incentive for us if we were to win? Tell us, what's the stakes for us? Okay? And Fir'aun said, I'm going to up the stakes for you. I'm going to sweeten the pot for you. Not only is there a monetary reward in it for you, but I'm going to give you power and position as well. Meaning what? Meaning now these are high stakes. There's a big stake in it for the magicians if they win, and there's a big stake for Fir'aun as well. Nobody is holding anything back anymore. This was everything that they had. They brought it to the scene. Not only that, then the Quran said they gathered everybody. So you have to imagine now, go back into history. Think about the Greek times, the Roman times. There must have been a Colosseum. There must have been a theater over there. They must have gathered thousands of people in the theater. And everybody is watching over there. And the magicians walk in. And they said, Oh Musa, imma an tulqiya, aw imma an nakuna nahnu al-mulkun. Do you want to throw your stick first? Or should we throw it first? And again, take them back in history. Make them feel that moment. That when two people are having a contest with each other, right, and one person is very arrogant and very confident about himself, he says, do you want to start? Or do you want me to start? It makes no difference to me, because I'm going to take you down, right? You want to throw the first punch? Or I throw the first punch. Whatever you want, there's nothing you can do about it. That's how arrogant they were at that time. So imagine them in that position now, right? And then Prophet Musa said, no, you throw the stick down. So they did that. And the Quran says, Saharu a'yunan nasi, they deceived the eyes of the people. Now scholars say that the Quran is just giving you a tip of it, but imagine back then, they would have used smoke, they would have used chanting, they would have come up dressed in a particular manner, they would have made these big claims as well, and then they throw their sticks down, and those sticks start wiggling. Can you imagine? The Quran says, وَاسْتَرْهَبُوهُمْ. They created terror. The word for terror that's where it's used in the Quran. They created terror in the hearts of the people. وَجَاءُوا بِسِحْرٍ عَظِيمٍ. And they brought a great piece of magic in front of them. Right? Now that's the moment. Imagine it. That the followers of Fir'aun are feeling on top of the world right now. They're as arrogant as anybody could be. Right? And they're very happy about themselves as well. We have almost defeated Musa. Who can ever come up with a piece of magic that is so great? They were drunk with power at that time. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, at that very moment, when they thought they were absolutely invincible, that is when we completely destroyed them, right? That's when we defeated them. And how simple are the words of the Quran? It wasn't complicated at all. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, at the next moment, we told Musa, throw down your staff, that's it. Like all of this complicated stuff, the answer to it is very simple. All you have to do is throw down your staff, and the rest of it became history. Right? Now, you take them in the moment, they will appreciate the story. Okay? You can be very creative in class as well. You can take them back into the moment by having debates and ask them to debate. If you were there in Uhud, would you have gone out of the city? Would you have remained in the city? Let's have a discussion about military strategy. If you were in Siffin, would you have chosen to fight for Imam Ali? Or do you understand why the other people chose not to fight, for example? A debate, we know exactly what the answer should be, but let's have a debate about it. When they start debating, they will understand what were the dilemmas that they used to face. Or, for example, go back in the moment and tell them to write it from a particular perspective. The perspective of a young man or a young woman Or the perspective of a journalist who's over there, what is he observing? I remember many years ago, this was probably in 97, 98, they wanted to talk about the event of Ghadir. And Brother Talib and Brother Rizwan at that time, they decided to show the event of Ghadir from the perspective of a speck of sand on the land of Ghadir. And then many years later, somebody met that speck of sand and asked him, were you there or not? Huh? And what happened when you were over there? Give me your perspective. Right? Going back into the moment, tell them to write a play about it. And in plays there are emotions and dilemmas that people face. In fact, you know what Imam Ali used to do to go back in the moment? He used to go for what we would call today field trips. And it's there in the Nahj al-Balagha. When he's talking to Imam al-Hasan alayhi ma afdalu salati wa salam, in his advice, and I end with that, to his son, listen to this very carefully now. He says, Ay bunayya, O my dear son, وَإِن لَمْ أَكُنْ عُمِّرْتُ عُمْرَ مَا كَانَ قَبْلِي, even though I did not live the lives of those who came before me. But فَقَدْ نَظَرْتُ فِي أَعْمَالِهِمْ, I have looked into their actions. وَفَكَّرْتُ فِي أَخْبَارِهِمْ, and I have thought about their reports, what has been written about them. No, not only that. وَسَرْتُ فِي آثَارِهِمْ, I have walked in their relics, I have walked in their ruins, I have walked in that part of history. To the extent, حَتَّى عُدْتُ كَأَحَدِهِمْ, until I became like one of them. That is how far back I went in the moment in history. No, even greater than that. وَكَأَنِّي بِمَا أُنْتَهَى إِلَيَّ مِنْ أُمُورِهِمْ قَدْ عُمِّرْتُ مَعَ أَوَّلِهِمْ إِلَى آخِرِهِمْ. When I look at all of the information that was given to me, it is as if I lived with the first of them and I lived with the last of them. So the first point about teaching history is whenever we are teaching history, let's not keep it dry with names and places and facts. Let us take them back into the moment. And inshallah, that will help them to appreciate why that part of history is important to us. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.